The moment Raja Yan Ditakuti Musuh really grabbed me wasn't even the big battle stuff. Though, trust me, it brings the battle stuff. It was that quiet, humiliating kind of heartbreak where a person walks all the way home with their chest full of hope. And the door doesn't just stay closed, it gets slammed in their face by the one hand they wanted to pull them in. That's the flavor of this 2026 drama. Brutal tenderness. It's a story about a crowned future that gets treated like an infection, and a son who comes back from exile thinking he's returning to blood and belonging, only to realize blood can be the coldest thing in the room. Welcome back to Flick Flair. And yeah, if you end up liking how I unpack this one, consider subscribing. No big speech. I just don't want you missing the next drama that emotionally dropkicks us. I'm doing moderate spoilers today, meaning I'll talk about the premise, the emotional turns, and some key moments you kind of need to discuss what the drama is doing. But I'm not going to lay out every late game reveal or whatever the final stretch is hiding up its sleeve. Newcomers can absolutely stay with me. I'm not here to ruin it. I'm here to make you want to hit play. So the setup is clean, almost mythic in how direct it is. Raven is the exiled crown prince of Redclaw. He's been out there, away, hardened, reshaped by rejection, and he comes back searching for his family. Not just for a throne, not just for power, for a place to stand without having to apologize for existing. And what does he get? His own father denies him. There's no sweeter way to say that. The man who should be the anchor is the wave. Then, because fate in these kinds of stories always has a twisted sense of timing, the terrifying blood shadow tribe attacks. Everything the father thought he was protecting, by rejecting Raven gets threatened anyway. And in that chaos, Raven's hidden power finally cracks open, and the entire balance shifts. And I love this drama. I love it in that specific way where you can tell the writers came in with something to say about family and authority, but they also know exactly when to stop talking and let a face do the work. This is one of those shows that understands the violence isn't the point. The violence is the pressure. The point is what leaks out of people when they're pressed. Now here's the first thing you need to know about Raja Yan Ditakuti Musuh. It's not a power fantasy in the lazy sense. It flirts with that. Sure, you get the exiled heir, you get the return, you get the "you will regret what you did to me" electricity in the air. But it refuses to make that satisfying in a cheap way. It keeps asking an annoying, adult question. What does it cost to become the person everyone suddenly needs? Because Raven's power isn't framed like a prize. It's framed like a problem that just happens to be useful when the sky is falling. And wait, before we even get into Raven's power, let's talk about how the show makes you feel exile. Because that's the first flex of the direction and the pacing. So many dramas treat exile like a backstory stamp. Here, it's like it clings to him. The way Raven carries himself when he returns isn't, "I'm back, Neil." It's, "I'm back, please don't make me beg." That difference is everything. There's a specific kind of tension in the early stretch. Raven's trying to be calm, trying to be dignified, trying to present himself as someone worthy of being acknowledged. But the tribe's space, Redclaw's home, doesn't receive him like home. It receives him like a threat, like a rumor that grew teeth. And that's where the drama is already doing more than the premise. It's not just father versus son. It's a whole community complicit in that rejection, whether through fear, politics, superstition, or just the comfort of letting someone else be the outcast so you never have to be. If you've ever had that experience of walking into a room and feeling the air change, like you just became a problem people don't want to solve, this drama nails that sensation. And I'm not saying that to be poetic. I'm saying the blocking, the way they stage people around him, the way conversations happen half a step too far away, it's all built to make you feel him being edged out. Here's where it gets messy though, the father. Because I expected the father character to be a straightforward villain. The cold king who banishes his son because he's cruel, or proud, or paranoid. And yes, there's plenty of coldness. But the drama doesn't let you flatten him into a cartoon. And that's one of the reasons it works. The father's rejection isn't played like a mustache twirling, "I hate you." It's played like a decision he's been rehearsing for years. Like he's convinced himself it's necessary. Like he's terrified of what Raven is. And he's calling that terror leadership. And that, unfortunately, is real. People in power rarely say, "I'm scared." They say, "I'm doing this for the tribe." They say, "This is tradition." They say, "You leave me no choice." And this drama understands that language of harm that pretends it's responsibility. Let me paint you the mini scene that, for me, is the emotional thesis statement, without getting overly granular with plot mechanics. Raven returns. You can almost feel the dust on him, like the road has been living on his skin. The gates, the guards, the hosh that spreads faster than any messenger. He steps forward with that careful, controlled posture of someone who's been told his whole life he needs to earn basic love. And then the father appears, and the space between them feels bigger than the entire settlement. No warm embrace. No, "my son." Just eyes measuring a weapon. Raven speaks, steady, respectful. And it's one of those moments where you can hear him choosing every word, like if he chooses wrong, he'll lose the last thread holding him together. The father's response lands like a blade laid gently on a table. Not a shout. Not even rage. Just refusal. A denial that is somehow more humiliating because it's so controlled. It's political. Public. Final. Raven doesn't explode. That's the part that killed me. He swallows it. His jaw tightens. His eyes do this thing. This tiny flicker, like he's bracing for pain he already knows. And he stands there, taking it. Because he still wants to belong. He still wants the impossible. To be accepted by someone who benefits from not accepting him. If you're still with me, good. Because the show doesn't let you sit in that heartbreak for too long before it throws a spear through the window. Metaphorically and sometimes literally. The Blood Shadow tribe's attack arrives like a storm that doesn't care about your family drama. And that's a classic move, right? The external threat forces internal conflict to show its true shape. But the execution here is what makes it sing. The attack isn't just bad guys show up. It's filmed and scored like a nightmare the tribe has been trying not to dream about. There's a sense that Blood Shadow isn't merely an enemy. It's a fear Red Claw has been feeding for years. Now, a quick aside, because I know someone's going to say it. Yes, the title is dramatic. Raja Yang Ditakuti Musuh, the king feared by enemies. It sounds like something you'd see stamped on a poster with a guy standing on a cliff, cape screaming in the wind, the whole deal. And you might think, okay, so this is going to be one of those shows that thinks being loud is the same as being epic. It's not that. It can be loud, but it's surprisingly intimate. It's more about being feared by enemies and misunderstood by your own people, which is honestly the war's curse. And this is where I'll drop a little rehook for you. The drama doesn't just ask whether Raven can save Red Claw. It asks whether Red Claw deserves saving, and whether Raven can survive being the answer to people who treated him like the problem. Let's talk about Raven as a character. Because if he doesn't work, none of this works. Raven is written with this careful balance of restraint and heat. He's not the cocky exiled prince returning to reclaim what's his with a smirk. He's not a saint either. There's anger in him, and the show doesn't moralize it away. It lets him be furious. But it also shows you how that fury has been trained, how exile forces you to learn patience because impatience gets you killed. And the performance? Again, I'm keeping this accessible and not diving into in episode X at minute Y. But I have to talk about the acting language. Raven's actor uses stillness like a weapon. The micro expressions do so much heavy lifting. There's a look Raven gives sometimes, especially when the tribe talks about duty or tradition, where his face goes blank in a very specific way. Not board blank, not wooden blank. It's the blankness of someone who's learned that reacting honestly will be used against him. That's trauma behavior. That's survival. The father, too, is played with this maddening control. Even when he's wrong, and he is wrong a lot, he doesn't come off as stupid. He comes off as convinced. And that's why he's dangerous. A foolish leader is scary. But a competent leader who chooses cruelty because it's convenient? That's the kind of person who can ruin an entire generation and still sleep at night. Visually, Raja Yang Ditakuti Musuh is a feast, but not in the glossy, overly polished way. It leans earthy. It likes texture. The sets feel lived in. The costuming has weight, like it was made for weather and war, not just for a photo shoot. The camera often sits at human height in the quieter scenes, which makes the drama feel grounded, like you're standing in the circle with them. Then, when the threat escalates, the framing opens up, and suddenly the world feels bigger and more hostile. That shift is not accidental. It's storytelling. The editing pace is interesting too. It's not a constant sprint. The show is willing to slow down and let tension pool. Sometimes it holds on a face longer than you expect, letting silence do the arguing. And silence matters here, because so much of the story is about what people refuse to say. I miss you. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I'm afraid. Those words don't come easily in Red Claw. So you get a lot of loaded pauses, glances that feel like they're carrying entire conversations. But because I'm not here to just gush, here's my respectful contrarian take. A lot of people are going to praise the world building, the lore vibe, the tribal politics, the sense of history. And I get it. It's immersive. It's one of the drama's strengths. But there are moments where the show leans a little too hard on important dialogue to explain what the image already communicated. Like it doesn't fully trust the audience to feel the stakes without a character saying the stakes out loud. Not constantly, but enough that I noticed. And it's a shame, because when this drama trusts its visual language, it's gorgeous. When it over-explains, it slightly dulls the blade. Now, does that ruin it? Not even close. But if you're going in expecting pure show-don't-tell perfection, I want to set expectations. This is still a drama. And sometimes dramas can't resist making a character walk into a room and announce the theme like they're reading a proverb off a wall tapestry. The blood shadow threat, without me inventing specifics the synopsis doesn't give, is staged as something more than we need a villain. They feel like the embodiment of everything Red Claw fears it has become weak against. And I like that the show doesn't treat them as a faceless horde. Even if you don't get intimate, named character depth on their side, you get a clear sense of how Red Claw has mythologized them. That matters because it shapes how Raven's power is perceived. When you're up against a monster you've been taught is unbeatable, any kind of power looks like either salvation or heresy. And Raven's hidden power, let's talk about it carefully, because this is where it would be easy to spoil the fun. The drama doesn't reveal it like a cheap surprise, he's special gimmick. It plants it as an unanswered question early on, like a shadow behind him. People talk around it. People flinch in ways that give you a hint. And when it finally breaks through during the crisis, it's not triumphant in a clean way. It's frightening. It's overwhelming. It feels like something he's been holding down for a reason. There's a moment during the chaos, again, not giving you a step-by-step, where the sound design drops into this muffled, underwater sensation, like Raven's hearing goes inward. The screams and clanging of conflict become distant, and the score turns into something primal, heavy on percussion that feels like a heartbeat that isn't entirely human. The camera tightens on him. The world narrows. And then, release. Not a neat superhero pose. More like a dam breaking. You can practically feel the air change. That scene is the kind of thing that makes you sit forward. Like, oh, we are not playing. And here's another rehook. Because if you think the story from there becomes, Raven is powerful, therefore he wins, you're underestimating how cruel this drama is willing to be to its own hero. One of the smart-ass choices Raja Yang Ditakuti Musuh makes is refusing to let Raven's power automatically earn him love. It earns him attention. It earns him fear. It earns him usefulness. Those are not the same thing. There's a difference between we need you and we accept you, and this drama lives in that difference. So you get this evolving relationship between Raven and Red Claw itself. The tribe becomes almost like a character. Suspicious, desperate, proud, wounded. Some people pull toward him because they see hope. Others pull away because he threatens the order they've built without him. And the father is trapped in the worst possible position for his ego. The son he rejected might be the only reason they survive. And if you've ever known a person who would rather let something burn than admit they were wrong, you can probably guess how that tension tastes. I also want to highlight how the show handles returning home as a psychological horror. Because that's what it is for Raven. Returning to the place that made you, after you've been changed by survival, is terrifying. You want to be seen, but you're also scared of being seen. Because being seen means being judged. Being measured against who you used to be. And exile doesn't just make you stronger. It makes you strange to the people who stayed. That's one of the central tragedies here. Raven comes back with depth, painful depth. And the people around him read that depth as danger. They don't know how to hold it. They only know how to react to it. On a purely watchability level, the drama's momentum is surprisingly addictive. The narrative keeps shifting pressure points, first the personal rejection, then the external invasion, then the political fallout of Raven becoming necessary. It's like the story keeps saying, okay, you thought this was the main problem? Cute. Here's the real problem. And I mean that as a compliment. It doesn't let the conflict stagnate. Where I got genuinely impressed is how the show uses the idea of the crown prince without romanticizing it. Royalty here is less glamour and more burden with teeth. Being the heir isn't about fancy status. It's about being the symbol everyone wants to control. And Raven is painfully aware that his identity is being tugged at from all sides. Son, weapon, future king, exile, threat, savior. He can't just be a person. Now, I'm going to be a little emotionally honest here. Because this drama hit something in me that I wasn't expecting. I didn't come into Raja Yang Ditakuti Musuh thinking I'd relate to an exiled crown prince. My bank account would like a word, okay? But the father-son dynamic, the way approval becomes the scarce resource you start chasing like it's oxygen, that felt uncomfortably familiar. Not in a one-to-one way, but in that emotional pattern, trying to earn warmth from someone who only speaks in assessments. Trying to be good enough, so the rejection finally turns into recognition. Watching Raven stand there and accept that denial with dignity, when everything in him wants to break, stirred up that old anger I think a lot of people carry quietly. The kind that says, why did I have to be strong? Why couldn't you just be kind? And the drama doesn't offer a cheap answer. It just sits with the wound. That's brave. Okay, let's talk craft again. Because I know some of you are here for the nerdy stuff. The direction uses color in a way that's not subtle but also not tacky. Red Claw as a concept is all about heat, earth, ember. The palette leans into warm tones, deep shadows, firelight. Blood Shadow, by contrast, is framed with colder, sharper contrasts. Even when the scene is lit similarly, the vibe shifts through costuming and texture. You can feel the difference in ideology through the visual language. Red Claw looks like a place where tradition has settled into the walls. Blood Shadow looks like movement, hunger, disruption. The fight choreography, again, without inventing exact sequences, prioritize impact over elegance. You're not watching ballet. You're watching survival. Bodies collide. People stumble. Hits look like they hurt. The camera doesn't always do that hyper-shaky thing that hides weak choreography. It often lets you see the geography of a conflict. That matters because it creates tension you can track. You know where danger is. You know what's at stake spatially, not just emotionally. That said, another tiny contrarian pinch. There are moments where the editing gets a little too excited and cuts too fast right when a shot could have breathed. It's like the show occasionally doesn't trust the physicality to carry the intensity. so it adds extra slices. It's not a deal breaker, but it's noticeable when you've just had a beautifully held dramatic moment and then the action suddenly gets chopped like a music video. Some viewers love that. I personally prefer when the camera lets the actors' bodies tell the story. And speaking of actors' bodies, Raven's performer sells fatigue. That's not something people talk about enough. A lot of powerful male-led performances are just posture and jawline. Here, you can feel the weight Raven carries in his shoulders. Even when he stands tall, there's a tension like he's holding himself together. In scenes where he has to negotiate or stand in front of people who don't want him there, you see him restrain himself physically. He doesn't fidget like a nervous person. He becomes still like a person trying not to show any weakness. And when the emotion finally leaks, when his voice tightens, when his eyes flash, it hits harder because you know how hard he's been working to stay contained. The father's actor, on the other hand, uses stillness differently. It's not restraint from pain. It's restraint from having to acknowledge anyone else's pain. He's still because he believes he's the center of order. The performance choice makes him infuriating in the most effective way. I found myself wanting someone, anyone, to shake him and force him to speak like a human being. Which, again, is the point. The drama wants you to feel how authority can hollow out empathy. And can we talk about the score? Because the music in this show is doing a lot of emotional directing. It leans on drums, low strings, and these sharp, almost ritualistic motifs that make the world feel older than the characters. When it swells with purpose. But the best use of sound is actually when the show pulls it back. There are quiet moments, especially around rejection and aftermath, where the absence of music makes the air feel heavier. Silence becomes judgment. Silence becomes grief. One of my favorite things the show does is let a scene end without the comforting release of a musical cue. No, wrap it up. We are moving on. Just, or the feeling sitting there, like you're supposed to live with it for a second. That's confident storytelling. And here's your next, keep watching, tease. The most interesting conflict isn't even Raven versus Bloodshadow. It's Raven versus the story Redclaw has told itself about why he had to be exiled in the first place. Because exile, in stories like this, is never only about the person exiled. It's about the community's fear. It's about what they couldn't control, what they couldn't understand, what they couldn't forgive. Raven's hidden power is the obvious excuse. But the deeper reason feels like shame. Like the tribe needed to scapegoat something so they could keep believing they were stable. And when he returns, he's not just a man walking back in. He's the return of everything they tried to deny. That's why the drama's title hits differently as you go. The king feared by enemies sounds like a brag. But the show slowly makes you consider, what if he's feared by enemies because he's dangerous, but he's feared by his own people because he's a mirror? Now, since the storyline we're working with is fairly clean, I'm not going to pretend I know every twist you'll encounter in the later stretch. But I can talk about the shape of the narrative the drama builds. It's essentially an identity crucible. Raven is forced into a position where he has to decide what kind of power he wants to be. Not what kind of power he has, what kind he wants to embody. Because there's a difference between being strong and being righteous. There's a difference between being feared and being respected. And there's definitely a difference between saving people and being loved by them. The drama is at its best when it makes you watch Raven do something heroic and then immediately pay an emotional price for it. Not because the writers want to punish him, but because they want to keep the story honest. You don't get to be the solution to everyone's problems and also keep your innocence. Especially not in a society built on hierarchy and fear. There's also a subtle thread about what a father thinks leadership is. The father treats leadership like control. Like if you can restrict the right people, you can prevent catastrophe. Raven's existence contradicts that. Raven is the catastrophe the father tried to prevent, and also the tool that prevents a bigger catastrophe. That irony is delicious, and the drama knows it. I will say, If you're the kind of viewer who needs likable characters right away, you might struggle for a bit. Not because Raven is unlikable, he's compelling, but because the world around him is full of people making cowardly choices. And that can be frustrating. You'll watch people doubt him, use him, test him, and it might make you want to throw something at your screen. I may or may not have hissed at my monitor at least once. Allegedly. But that frustration is also part of why it feels real. Communities don't change overnight because someone cool showed up with glowing power. People cling to the beliefs that keep them safe until those beliefs start getting them killed. And even then, they bargain. They deny. They blame. Raja Yang Ditakuti Musuh understands the ugliness of social change. It's never clean, and it's rarely fair. Let's linger for a second on the theme of being useful. This drama is practically a case study in how quickly people will reframe their cruelty when your value becomes undeniable. They don't apologize, they pivot. They don't admit they were wrong, they rewrite history. We were testing you. We needed to be sure. It was for the tribe. Raven's power forces that pivot, and you get to watch him navigate it. Does he accept their sudden dependence? Does he demand accountability? Does he swallow it because survival comes first? And if you think that's an easy moral choice, the show makes sure you feel how complicated it is. When blood shadow is at the door, you don't always have the luxury of righteous speeches. Sometimes you just have to keep people alive, even if they don't deserve you. That's not a comfortable message, but it's a potent one. Now, can we appreciate how the drama handles masculinity? Because it would have been very easy to make this a cold badass learns to trust again cliché. Instead, Raven's masculinity is layered. He's strong, yes, but he's also emotionally intelligent in a way the father isn't. He reads rooms. He notices when someone's afraid. He understands that power without perception is just violence. And the show doesn't mock that sensitivity. It frames it as part of what makes him dangerous to enemies. He's not just a weapon. He's a strategist of human behavior. The father, by contrast, is the version of masculinity that confuses emotional repression with strength. And watching those two models collide, one born from survival, the other born from authority, is one of the drama's richest tensions. It's not new versus old in a simplistic way. It's adaptive truth versus rigid pride. Here's another rehook, because I know some of you are waiting for me to talk about whether the show sticks the landing emotionally. The real question isn't whether Raven becomes king in any official sense. It's whether he ever gets to stop auditioning for love. One thing I want to give the writers credit for is how they seed moral ambiguity around Raven's power. Hidden power stories can get boring when the power is basically just super strength plus plot armor. Here, the power feels like it has consequences. Even if the drama doesn't spell out the rules in a rigid, fantasy manual way, you get the sense that unleashing it changes Raven. It changes how people see him. It changes what he might become if he leans into it too easily. And that's important because the title, Feared by Enemies, could easily slide into villain-adjacent territory if the show wanted. The drama toys with that edge. It lets you feel the seduction of fear. How easy it would be for Raven to say, "Fine, if you're going to fear me anyway, I'll give you something to fear." That impulse is human, and the show doesn't pretend it isn't. In terms of chemistry, not romantic chemistry necessarily, because the core relationship here is familial and political. The chemistry between Raven and the father is electric in that painful way where you can sense years of unsaid sentences. Their scenes are like staring at a cracked wall and realizing the crack goes all the way through the foundation. They don't need to yell to hurt each other. They just need to stand in the same space. And the way the tribe reacts to that tension creates this constant sense of someone's going to make the wrong move. You know those scenes where everyone is watching two people talk, but nobody is actually watching the words. They're watching for violence? The drama uses that energy well. Conversations feel like standoffs. The production design deserves another shout, too, because Red Claw's environment isn't just a backdrop. The spaces feel political. Who gets to stand where? Who is framed higher? Who is surrounded? Who is isolated? Those choices are storytelling. When Raven is denied, the short language often places him at an edge, slightly separated, sometimes with physical barriers in frame. When he becomes necessary, the same spaces start pulling him inward. But you can still feel the resistance, like the tribe is letting him in while keeping a hand on the latch. That's a visual metaphor that lands without needing a speech. And when the show does that, it's firing on all cylinders. Okay, I want to address pacing, because long-form dramas like this can sometimes wobble in the middle. Raja Yang Ditakuti Musuh mostly avoids the dreaded mid-season swamp by using escalation that feels earned. The Blood Shadow attack isn't a one-off event. It creates aftermath. It shifts alliances. It forces decision-making. And because Raven's power changes the political ecosystem, the story has new problems to explore. It's not just fight, win, repeat. It's fight, survive, now deal with the consequences of surviving. Still, there are a couple stretches where the drama seems to circle the same emotional beat, especially around trust. You might find yourself thinking, okay, I get it, they don't trust him. But even then, the actors usually keep it engaging because the distrust isn't monolithic. Different characters distrust him for different reasons. Fear isn't one flavor. Sometimes it's jealousy. Sometimes it's guilt. Sometimes it's genuine worry about what his power might do. That variety saves the repetition from becoming unbearable. Also, I have to say, this drama understands how to make respect feel like a plot event. In a lot of shows, respect just magically appears when the protagonist does something cool. Here, respect is slow, reluctant, and occasionally ugly. People respect Raven while still resenting him. People respect him while still not wanting him to sit at the table. And that's way more interesting than a clean hero's journey where everyone claps. And yeah, there are moments where the show lets you feel that satisfaction. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. When Raven finally shifts a room, when you see people recalibrate in real time, it's satisfying. But the show keeps that satisfaction sharp-edged. Like, congratulations, you're valued now. Isn't that depressing? Now, because I'm trying not to fabricate specifics beyond what we have, I'm going to describe something the drama does structurally rather than recounting exact sequences. It often frames Raven as someone caught between two wars. The external war against Blood Shadow and the internal war for legitimacy. And the internal war is arguably more exhausting because it requires patience. It requires diplomacy. It requires Raven to be strategic with his own pain. That's where the writing shines. It treats emotional regulation like an act of strength. Raven doesn't just swing a weapon or unleash power. He chooses when not to. He chooses when to bite back and when to swallow. That's a kind of courage that doesn't get enough spotlight. Here's another little personal confession, since we're already in it. Watching Raven navigate a place that insists on misunderstanding him made me think about how exhausting it is to be misread in real life. Like when you're trying so hard to communicate clearly, and people keep hearing the version of you they already decided exists. The drama captures that claustrophobia. Raven can do the right thing and still be interpreted as dangerous, arrogant, or manipulative. Because people don't just react to what you do. They react to what they need you to be in their story. And if that doesn't make you a little feral, are you even watching? There's also an interesting undercurrent about inheritance. Not just inheritance of power or title, but inheritance of trauma. The father passes down a world where love is conditional and fear is policy. Raven inherits that, whether he wants it or not, and the drama keeps asking whether he'll repeat it or break it. That's a timeless theme, but it lands because the performances make it intimate. This isn't abstract. You see it in how Raven hesitates. You see it in how he flinches at certain words. You see it in how he tries to choose a different kind of strength. And just when you think the show is going to settle into a stable rhythm, external threat, internal politics, power management, It does this thing where it reminds you the true villain might be pride. Not blood shadow. Not even the father in the simplistic sense. Pride as a system. Pride as a religion. Pride as the reason people would rather die than change. That's why the drama feels heavier than its premise. Because it's not only about defeating an enemy, it's about defeating the part of your own home that keeps creating enemies. Now let's talk about the viewing experience. Because I know some of you care less about craft and more about, was it bingeable? For me, yes. It's the kind of drama where you tell yourself you'll watch one more episode, one more installment, depending on how it's formatted. And then suddenly it's 2 a.m. and you're sitting there like, I need water and therapy. The cliffhangers aren't always explosive, but they're emotionally sticky. They end scenes on choices, on looks, on unresolved tension. The show understands that the best hook isn't always, someone got stabbed. Sometimes it's, someone didn't apologize. And there's something else the drama does that I want to praise. It doesn't make Raven's exile a romantic badge. It doesn't glamorize suffering. It acknowledges that exile changes you in ways that aren't cute. It makes you suspicious. It makes you lonely. It makes you hungry in a way that isn't just about food. Raven's hunger for belonging is portrayed as both sympathetic and dangerous. Because hunger can make you compromise. Hunger can make you accept scraps and call them feasts. If you're a newcomer wondering whether this is too heavy, I'll say this. It's intense, but it's not hopeless. The show has ember-warm moments, moments of loyalty, moments where someone sees Raven as a person instead of a symbol. Those moments matter because they're rare. They feel earned. And when you get them, you feel this little exhale, like you've been holding your breath along with him. But the drama also refuses to let those moments solve everything. It doesn't pretend one kind gesture fixes years of rejection. Again, adult storytelling. Pain doesn't evaporate because someone finally says something nice. Here's a rehook that I think captures why you should stick with it past the early shock. The most jaw-tightening scenes aren't the battles. They're the conversations after the battles. When people decide who gets credit, who gets blamed, and who gets erased. Because yes, the blood shadow attack is a catalyst. But the political aftermath is where characters reveal themselves. Who uses fear to consolidate control. Who uses Raven's power as propaganda. Who quietly hopes he'll die so they can go back to the old order. The show doesn't always spell those motives out. But it doesn't have to. You can read it in who stands too close to the throne, who speaks too quickly, who avoids Raven's eyes. This is also where the supporting cast, again, I'm not going to invent a roster of named characters we don't have, does a lot of heavy lifting. The tribe around Raven isn't just a faceless crowd. There are distinct types that feel human. The cautious pragmatists, the fearful traditionalists, the opportunists who smell a shift in power, the quiet ones who have maybe always questioned the father but never had a reason to speak. The show gives enough specificity in performance and behavior that you start recognizing who is who even without the script shouting it at you. The direction helps there too. The camera often picks out reactions in group scenes. Someone hearing a statement and stiffening. Someone exchanging a look. Someone smiling when they shouldn't. Those little reaction shots are like breadcrumbs. They're the drama saying, pay attention. This isn't just about Raven. Now, one thing I can already hear in the comments, is it predictable? And here's my honest answer. The broad strokes? Sure. Exiled returns, gets rejected, enemy attacks, hidden power awakens. Those are archetypal beats. The surprise isn't the skeleton. It's the muscle. It's how it feels, how long it lingers, how ugly it gets when people have to live with the consequences. The show's unpredictability lives in character behavior, not in cheap plot swerves. That's why it kept me engaged. I wasn't watching to find out what happens in the shallow sense. I was watching to see what Raven becomes when nobody gives him a clean path. I was watching to see whether the father's pride finally snaps or if it calcifies into tragedy. I was watching to see whether Red Claw can evolve without pretending it didn't do harm. And the title keeps echoing in your head as the drama goes on. Feared by enemies. Okay, but what does it mean to be feared? Fear isn't respect. Fear is distance. Fear is isolation. Fear is people using you like a wall between them and death. And the show keeps putting Raven in positions where he has to decide if he can live with being that wall. There's a moment, more of a recurring emotional beat than a single event, where you can feel Raven realizing that returning home didn't end his exile. It just changed its shape. He's physically back, but emotionally he's still outside, still watched, still judged. That's one of the most heartbreaking truths in the drama. And it's delivered without melodrama. It's delivered through small things. How people pause before approaching him, how they choose their words, how they praise him like they're praising a storm for not destroying them. If that doesn't make you want to reach through the screen and drag him somewhere safe, you're stronger than me. Now, I want to touch on something that might make or break it for some viewers. The drama's tone is serious. It has warmth, it has humanity, but it doesn't wink at you much. It's not trying to be cute, it's trying to be immersive. The humor, when it appears, is mostly the kind that comes from human friction. Someone being blunt, someone being quietly exasperated, the occasional dry moment that makes you breathe. It's not a comedy release valve. So if you need levity every 10 minutes, this might feel heavy. Me, I like that commitment. It matched the story. Exile and invasion and family betrayal shouldn't feel breezy. That said, I did have one slightly goofy moment as a viewer where I realized I'd been sitting there for an hour with my shoulders tense like I was on the council too, like someone was going to ask my opinion on tribal succession. I had to physically relax. So yes, the immersion works. Maybe too well. Hydrate. Blink. Another point in the drama's favor is how it treats power as relational. Raven's power is not just something he has. It changes relationships. It warps dynamics. It makes people behave differently. It makes old loyalties questionable. It tempts others toward violence or manipulation. That's what real power does. The show doesn't treat power like a shiny tool. It treats it like gravity. And because it treats power like gravity, the father's rejection becomes even more significant. Rejecting Raven wasn't only personal. It was an attempt to deny gravity. To pretend you can exile a problem and it will never return. But gravity always returns. It returns as consequence. There's also this thread of identity that I think newcomers will connect with even if you're not usually into historical or tribal epics. Raven is essentially living the question, who am I if my own people refuse to name me as one of them? That's an identity crisis a lot of people can recognize in different forms: family rejection, cultural displacement, being the black sheep, being the person everyone projects onto. The show uses a big dramatic framework to talk about something intimate. If you're wondering whether you need to be into action to enjoy this, I'd say no, but it helps. The action is a vehicle, not the destination. The destination is the emotional reckoning. And that's why I keep coming back to the father-son axis. It's the core wound. Blood shadow is the blade pressing into it, forcing it open. And okay, I promised moderate spoilers. So I'll say this much about the arc shape without giving away specific late-game events. The drama doesn't let Raven stay in one emotional posture. He evolves. His relationship to his power evolves. His relationship to Red Claw evolves. And the father's position becomes increasingly untenable as reality keeps proving that denial isn't leadership. It's the kind of escalation that feels satisfying because it's moral, not just logistical. You're not just watching armies move, you're watching beliefs collapse. I also want to praise the way the show shoots faces. That sounds basic, but it's not. Some directors treat faces like they're just there to deliver lines. Here, faces are landscapes. The camera lingers on Raven when he's listening, not just when he's speaking. That's a choice. It tells you the show cares about interiority. It cares about what's happening in the silence between words. There's a particular kind of shot the drama loves. Raven slightly off-center in frame, with the community behind him blurred, like a presence he can't fully join. That's visual loneliness, and it repeats enough to become a motif without becoming cheesy. Now, if I had to point to where the drama could lose some viewers, it's that the politics can feel dense if you're not used to watching stories where social structure is part of the conflict. Red Claw isn't just a family, it's a system. And systems don't change because one man comes back with power. They resist, they adapt, they bargain. So you might get scenes that feel like, why are we still talking? When what's actually happening is the drama showing you how hard it is to uproot a belief. If you go in expecting non-stop fighting, you might get impatient. But if you go in expecting tension, you'll be fed. And here's a final rehook before I keep digging deeper into what makes this drama linger. The most haunting part isn't that Raven is rejected once. It's that even when he proves himself, the acceptance comes with conditions. And you can feel those conditions tightening like a rope. Because that's the real horror, isn't it? Not just being told, no, being told, yes, but don't sit too close to power. Yes, but don't make people uncomfortable. Yes, but don't remind us of what we did. Yes, but don't become too much. The drama understands how conditional love operates inside hierarchies. It's not love, it's permission. I'm going to stop this chunk here at a natural pivot, because the next thing I want to unpack is how Raja Yan Ditakuti Musuh uses the blood shadow conflict to expose Red Claw's internal hypocrisy, and how Raven's hidden power becomes less of a trump card and more of a moral trap the longer the story goes. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that moral trap is where the drama becomes way more interesting than the title might suggest. Because the moment Raven's hidden power shows up and turns the tide, it's like Red Claw collectively exhales and immediately starts rewriting the story in real time. The same people who were happy to let him stand outside the gates now want to frame him as a Red Claw weapon, a Red Claw blessing, a Red Claw answer. Notice the language. It's possessive. It's not, Raven saved us. It's, we were saved. It's, our strength revealed itself. And the drama is sharp enough to make that feel grows without needing to underline it with a lecture. Blood Shadow, in that sense, is less a separate villain and more a pressure test that exposes Red Claw's hypocrisy. When everything is comfortable, tradition is sacred. When everything is burning, tradition becomes negotiable. When Raven is inconvenient, the father's law is absolute. When Raven is necessary, suddenly there's space for exceptions. And you can practically watch Raven clock that contradiction. He doesn't always call it out, because he's still trying to keep people alive. But you see it in his eyes, that slight narrowing like, so the rules are real until they cost you something. If you've ever lived under inconsistent rules, where the people in charge twist standards depending on who benefits, this drama is going to hit you right in the nerve. It doesn't just show injustice. It shows the mechanics of injustice. The casualness. The way a community can convince itself it's righteous while doing something cruel. It's not grand villainy. It's administrative cruelty. And honestly, that's the kind that sticks around the longest. There's a moment in the middle stretch, again, I'm staying general on purpose, where you can feel the story pivot from, will Raven be accepted, to, what will acceptance cost him? That's a different question entirely, because acceptance in a hierarchy usually isn't free. It's transactional. It comes with expectations, with control, with a leash disguised as a garland. And the more Raven becomes the answer, the more people feel entitled to him, to his body, to his power, to his future. Here's where it gets almost uncomfortably modern, even though the setting feels mythic and tribal. The show is basically asking, when someone has an extraordinary ability, who gets to decide how it's used? The person who holds it, or the society that needs it? And if the person says no, do they have the right to say no when lives are on the line? That's not an easy moral puzzle. And Raja Yang Ditakuti Musuh doesn't pretend it is. And if you're thinking, okay, but isn't Raven the crown prince? Wouldn't he just command things? That's the trap. Title without legitimacy is just a word. Crown Prince in exile is basically a ghost. He has symbolic claim, but socially he's been stripped of belonging. So whenever he asserts himself, the drama makes you feel the risk. He's always one wrong tone away from being framed as arrogant. One wrong decision away from being framed as a threat. He doesn't have the luxury of being imperfect. That's the kind of pressure that breaks people or changes them, and the show is very aware of that. Now, let's talk about Blood Shadow again, because I want to be careful here. With the synopsis we have, I can't responsibly pretend I know the internal politics of that tribe, or whether the drama later humanized them through specific arcs. So I'm not going to invent a sympathetic Blood Shadow leader or a secret treaty or whatever. But I can talk about what the drama communicates through how it frames them. Blood Shadow is shot like a force, like an oncoming hunger. Their presence changes the temperature of the scenes. Even when they're not physically there, the sound design sometimes lets you hear echoes of threat. Distant drums, a wind shift, a sudden hosh in dialogue. The drama builds them as something that lives in Red Claw's collective fear. And that's important, because collective fear is the father's main tool. When leaders want to maintain control, they often point to an enemy and say, "Without me, you will die." When the enemy actually arrives, the leader's story is validated, but only if he can keep the narrative intact. Raven complicates that, because Raven proves survival might be possible without the father's methods. And that's why the father's pride becomes more than personal. It becomes political self-preservation. If you want a reason to keep watching past the initial cool power awakening moment, it's this. The drama gradually makes it clear that Raven isn't just fighting enemies outside the walls. He's fighting a whole ideological system inside the walls that would rather exploit him than embrace him. One thing I really appreciated is how the show lets Raven be strategic without turning him into a chessboard robot. Sometimes, smart protagonist writing makes characters feel like they're reading ahead in the script. Here, Raven's intelligence feels rooted in experience. Exile taught him to read people fast. Exile taught him to anticipate betrayal. Exile taught him that mercy and hesitation can be used against you. But so can cruelty. His strategy isn't omniscience. It's caution sharpened into instinct. And the actor sells that with this constant sense of calculation behind the eyes. You can see him listening not just to the words, but to the intention behind them. That kind of performance is harder than it looks, because it's easy to overdo it and become melodramatic. But Raven's actor keeps it internal. It's like you're watching thought happen. Let's zoom in on one of the drama's strongest technical choices, the use of proximity. In early scenes, people keep their distance from Raven. The camera mirrors that distance. You get wider framing, Raven isolated. When he's forced into the center, when he becomes useful, the camera starts coming closer. But it doesn't suddenly become intimate and warm. It becomes invasive. Faces crowd the frame. Bodies compress around him. And it creates this claustrophobic feeling like, oh, so now you want him close? It's not comfort, it's pressure. That's a directorial decision that tells a story without dialogue. And it's one of those things that makes me want to shake some viewers gently when they say visuals don't matter. Visuals are the subtext. Visuals are the emotional weather. And speaking of emotional weather, the lighting in this drama deserves praise. Firelight is used like a character. In Red Claw scenes, the warm flicker makes everything feel ancient, communal, but also unstable, because fire is always consuming. Shadows dance on faces, and it gives conversations this subtle sense of threat. Even peaceful moments have a tremor. In bloodshed-related scenes, the light tends to feel harsher, colder, more metallic, like the world itself has less mercy. The contrast isn't always literal. Sometimes it's tonal. But it's consistent enough that your body starts reading it automatically. Now, I'm going to offer another gentle contrarian take, because I can already hear the hype machine. Some people will call this drama perfectly paced, because it's intense and it keeps moving. I don't fully agree. I think it's mostly well-paced. But there are stretches where the drama's desire to maintain constant tension means it doesn't always give you enough decompression time. And decompression isn't filler. It's oxygen. It's what makes the next blow land harder. There were a couple moments where I wanted just a little more quiet domesticity. Just a little more space for Raven to exist without being challenged by someone. Not because I needed it to be cute, but because the relentless grind can flatten emotional peaks if you don't let them breathe. That said, when the drama does slow down, it usually uses that time well. It doesn't slow down to waste time. It slows down to deepen the wound. There are small scenes, glances, half conversations, moments where someone almost reaches out and then stops, that create this sense of everything could have been different. And those little almosts are devastating. Here's a rehook for you. The most painful part isn't watching Raven unleash power. It's watching him realize that power doesn't protect him from being emotionally abandoned, and sometimes it makes the abandonment easier for others to justify. Because yes, people can rationalize rejecting someone powerful. They'll call it caution. They'll call it wisdom. They'll call it protecting the tribe. But at the core, it's the same old human ugliness. If we can't control you, we'll isolate you. And that's where the title starts to feel like a curse. Being feared by enemies means you can survive them. Being feared by your own people means you never get to rest. One of the show's most interesting undercurrents is how it frames leadership as loneliness. The father is lonely in his own way, self-inflicted loneliness, the kind that comes from believing no one else is qualified to hold the weight. Raven is lonely in the opposite way, forced loneliness, the kind that comes from being denied a place to put your love. The drama sets them up as parallel, and that parallel makes the conflict richer. It's not just bad father, good son. It's two different wounds, two different coping mechanisms, crashing into each other with the whole tribe caught in the blast radius. And the drama doesn't always let you hate the father in a simple way. There are moments where you can sense the father's fear. Not fear of blood shadow exactly, but fear of being wrong, fear of losing control, fear that if he admits Raven should never have been exiled, then he has to face what that decision says about him as a man and as a leader. And some people would rather die than face that. I'm not defending him, to be clear. I'm just saying the drama understands the psychology of power. It doesn't turn him into a clown villain. It turns him into a real kind of villain. The kind who believes he's right. Now, can we talk about the way Raja Yang Ditakuti Musuh uses ritual and tradition as both comfort and weapon? Again, I'm not naming specific ceremonies the synopsis doesn't mention. But the drama has that vibe where community gatherings, council circles, inherited symbols, those things matter. And the show is smart enough to show how tradition can be beautiful when it binds people together, and horrifying when it's used to justify cruelty. You get that duality constantly. The same cultural structure that gives people identity can also be used to exile someone for being wrong. Raven, coming back, becomes the question tradition can't answer cleanly. Is he a son? Is he a threat? Is he an omen? Is he a blessing? The tribe wants a label, because labels are how communities control uncertainty. Raven resists labels, because labels are what got him banished. This drama is basically about what happens when a person refuses to fit the story that was written about them. And I have to say, as a viewer, that's empowering in a very non-cheesy way. Not because it turns into a motivational quote, but because it shows how exhausting it is to resist being turned into a symbol. Raven doesn't get to just be. He has to fight to be seen as human. The music supports that tension with these motifs that feel like they're pulling in opposite directions. There's often a heroic swell when Raven stands firm, but it's undercut by darker tones that remind you, heroism here isn't celebrated, it's exploited. And when the show wants to make you feel dread, it doesn't always crank the volume. It sometimes uses a thin, almost whispery soundscape that makes everything feel precarious. like the world is holding its breath. I want to highlight the use of silence again, because it's one of the most effective weapons in the show. There are scenes where someone says something that should be met with outrage, but nobody responds. And that silence is the outrage. It's the tribe's complicity. It's the fear of speaking. It's the knowledge that words can get you punished. You can feel the social control in the absence of sound. That's good drama. The kind that makes you feel uncomfortable because you recognize it. And here's something that really made me lean in. The show doesn't treat Raven's hidden power as pure destiny. It treats it as a choice he keeps having to make. Not just activate it or don't, but what kind of person will I be when I use it? Will I use it like a shield? Like a sword? Like a threat? Like a performance? Like a bargaining chip? The power becomes a moral mirror. That's why I called it a moral trap. Because once people see what Raven can do, they start expecting it. They start planning around it. They start taking risks they wouldn't take otherwise. Because they assume Raven will clean it up. They treat him like a guarantee. And when you become a guarantee, you stop being a person. You become infrastructure. That's a chilling idea. And the drama toys with it in a way that feels deliberate. It's not just Raven is strong. It's Raven is being turned into a tool. If you're still not convinced this is deeper than a standard exiled prince returns story, keep watching for how the drama explores dependence. Because dependence can look like admiration. It can look like respect. It can look like love. But it's not love. It's need. And need can be selfish. This is where the show's emotional beats start stacking up. Raven wants belonging. The tribe wants survival. The father wants control. Those desires overlap sometimes, but they also clash. And the clashes are where the scenes crackle. There's a specific tension in the way people address Raven after his power is revealed. The tone changes. The language gets careful. You can almost hear people trying to figure out what to call him. Do they call him by name, acknowledging personhood? Or do they call him by title, acknowledging utility? Do they frame him as ours? Or do they keep him at arm's length as dangerous? And Raven, to his credit, doesn't immediately bask in it. He doesn't do the "I told you so" victory lap. He's too tired, too aware. And the actor's performance sells that exhaustion in these tiny ways. A delayed response, a gaze that drops for half a second, a breath held too long. He's not enjoying the fear. He's enduring it. Now, I want to talk about the drama's emotional catharsis, without spoiling exactly how it manifests. Because the show is very careful about where it gives you release. It doesn't hand you catharsis in the obvious places. Sometimes, right when you're expecting a big confrontation, it swerves into something quieter. Not quieter in impact, quieter in delivery. Like the drama understands that the most meaningful confrontations aren't always shouted. Sometimes they're whispered. Sometimes they're a choice not to retaliate. Sometimes they're an act of restraint that nobody thanks you for. That kind of storytelling doesn't always trend on social media because it's not as clip-friendly. But it's the stuff that lingers in your chest. Here's my next rehook. The drama's best twist isn't a plot reveal. It's the moment you realize Raven's biggest enemy might be the part of him that still wants his father's approval. Because that's the tragedy, right? Raven could become strong enough to crush enemies. But he can't crush the need to be loved by the man who denied him. And the show doesn't shame him for that need. It treats it as human. Painfully human. I think that's why I connected with this drama more than I expected. Not because I've lived in a tribe under siege, obviously, but because the emotional logic is universal. When you grow up seeking approval from someone who withholds it, you can become incredible at proving yourself and still feel like a child begging at a locked door. Raven's arc speaks to that. It's not just about reclaiming a throne. It's about reclaiming self-worth from a system that tried to define him as unworthy. Now, on the topic of performances beyond Raven and the father, I want to give flowers to the ensemble energy. Even when a scene is built around Raven, You can feel the community reacting. Background performances matter in a show like this. If the extras and supporting actors are just standing around like furniture, the world feels fake. Here, people watch. People whisper. People shift their weight like they're choosing sides. The tribe feels like it has a pulse. That's not accidental. That's either strong directing or strong culture on set or both. And it makes the political tension believable, because politics is social. It's bodies in space. It's the way a room leans. I also appreciate that the drama doesn't make the tribe instantly wise once the threat appears. Sometimes shows do that. The crisis arrives and suddenly everyone becomes noble and united. Not here. Crisis amplifies existing faults. It makes opportunists bolder. It makes cowards more defensive. It makes true believers more extreme. That's real. When people are scared, they don't automatically become better. They become more themselves. And the show is not afraid to let that be ugly. There's a sequence in the middle portion. Think of it as a fallout stretch, where the drama really leans into the idea that saving people doesn't automatically earn you their loyalty. In fact, it can make them resent you, because your competence exposes their failure, because your strength highlights their weakness, because your sacrifice makes them feel guilty, and guilt often turns into anger. That's one of the rawest truths the drama taps into. You'll see characters respond to Raven not just with gratitude, but with this tight, defensive energy like, "Don't make me owe you." And Raven, being who he is, doesn't always push back. Sometimes he accepts the unfairness because he thinks that's what leadership is. And that's where the moral trap tightens. Because if leadership means swallowing injustice for the greater good, how long before you become numb? How long before you become like the father? That's the question hovering over everything. Visually, the drama reinforces this by gradually shifting how Raven is framed. Early on, he's the outsider in wide shots. Later, he's the center of the frame more often, but the frame is tighter. The closer he gets to belonging, the less air he has. It's like the show is saying, "You wanted to come home? Home is a cage with warmer lighting." And I know that sounds harsh, but it's the vibe. It's not a comforting story. It's a story about earning a place in a system that might not deserve your loyalty. Now, let's talk about action again for a second, because I don't want to undersell how well the drama uses combat as narrative. The fights aren't just spectacle, they're turning points. Each clash with Blood Shadow changes the social dynamics inside Red Claw. Who takes credit? Who gets blamed? Who shows courage? Who hesitates? Who betrays? Even if the show doesn't spell those out in a scoreboard way, you can track the emotional consequences. And the sound mix in those sequences is doing serious work. The clang of metal, the thud of bodies, the sharp intake of breath before a strike, it's tactile. You feel the danger. The music doesn't drown out the brutality. It often frames it, then steps back to let the raw sound hit you. That restraint is what makes the big moments pop. That said, I have one more nitpick. Sometimes the score tells you what to feel a beat too early, like it swells before the emotional moment fully lands. It's not constant, and when it's good, it's very good. But there were a few spots where I wanted the music to trust the actors more. Give me 2 more seconds of raw performance before you start conducting my tears. You know? And yes, I did tear up. Not a full ugly cry, but that sting behind the eyes where you're mad at yourself because you didn't think you were that invested. And now here you are, emotionally compromised by a man named Raven trying to be loved. Another thread I want to pull on is the theme of the enemy. Blood Shadow is an enemy, sure, but the drama also shows how the idea of an enemy is useful to leadership. If you can keep people afraid, you can keep them obedient. The father's rejection of Raven may have been partially driven by fear of Raven's power, but it also serves a political function. It defines what Red Claw is not. We are not that. We do not allow that. Exile becomes a way to draw a boundary around identity. Then Blood Shadow attacks, and the boundary fails. suddenly Red Claw needs the very thing it exiled. That's not just irony. It's a commentary on how rigid identity politics can backfire. When you define yourself by exclusion, you can end up excluding the very strength you need to survive. That's a theme that feels, let's just say it feels relevant. And the drama doesn't hammer it like a sermon. It lets it emerge through story consequences. Here's a rehook, because this is where the drama starts playing with your loyalties. You'll find yourself not only rooting for Raven, but also occasionally fearing what he could become if the tribe keeps treating him like a weapon instead of a son. Because the show flirts with the darker possibility. Not in a Raven turns evil, cheap shock way, but in a Raven is being pushed toward emotional detachment way. When you're constantly used, you learn to use back. When you're constantly feared, you stop trying to be understood. When you're constantly denied love, you start thinking love is for other people. And that is the real tragedy. Not whether he wins a battle, whether he loses his softness. The drama also does something I respect. It doesn't make Raven's power solve political problems. It can solve immediate threats. It can shift a battlefield. But it can't magically fix a father's pride or a tribe's prejudice. And I love that, because it keeps the story grounded. Power can change outcomes, but it doesn't automatically change hearts. If anything, it can harden hearts further. People double down when their worldview is threatened. That's why those council-like scenes, where people debate, argue, posture, are actually some of the most suspenseful in the drama. Because violence is honest. It's awful, but it's honest. Politics is slippery. And the show understands that what happens in a quiet room can be deadlier than what happens on a battlefield. There's also a lot of interesting subtext about what it means to be the future. Raven as Crown Prince represents a future that terrifies the old guard. Not just because of his power, but because of what his existence implies, that the old guard's decisions were flawed, that tradition might need revision, that control might need to loosen. People who benefit from the current system often treat the future as a threat. So Raven isn't just fighting Blood Shadow. He's fighting the inertia of a society that would rather cling to a broken past than risk a different future. That's heavy. And the show makes it personal. Now, I want to talk about the title again. Because as the drama unfolds, Raja Yang Ditakuti Musuh starts to feel less like a boast and more like an identity being forced onto Raven. Like the world is trying to crown him with fear rather than respect. And that matters. Because being feared by enemies is an external metric. It's how others respond to you. It's not who you are. And Raven's arc is partially about refusing to let other people's fear define him. But can he refuse? That's the tension. When everyone treats you like a monster, do you eventually become one? Or do you spend your whole life proving you're not? There's a quite philosophical cruelty in that question. And the drama doesn't answer it too neatly. Another element I enjoyed is how the show treats physical space as symbolic. Red Claw's gate, the central fire, the leadership seat, these become more than locations. They become emotional thresholds. Raven's relationship to these spaces shifts over time. Early on, being near them feels like trespassing. Later, it feels like he's being allowed near them under supervision. And the drama uses that to show that acceptance isn't binary. It's incremental, conditional, sometimes performative. You can feel Raven walking on eggshells in his own home. That's the kind of tension that makes you want to scream at the tribe. He's not your emergency tool. He's a person. But of course, they don't hear you. And that's what makes it good TV. It's frustrating in an intentional way. Now, for newcomers, I will say this, you don't have to understand every piece of lore to enjoy it. The emotional stakes are legible even if you're not tracking every faction nuance. The show is grounded in basic human needs: belonging, respect, safety, recognition. If you follow those, you'll follow the story. Also, the drama is surprisingly good at using visual shorthand to remind you who holds power, who speaks first, who interrupts, who sits while others stand, who gets framed in warm light and who gets pushed into shadow. Those choices keep the politics readable without constant exposition. But yes, there is some exposition. It's a big story. It needs some scaffolding. I just think the show is strongest when it lets the viewer connect the dots. There's another performance detail I loved: Raven's voice. Not the words, the voice. In early scenes, it has this controlled softness, like he's trying not to provoke anyone. Later, when he's forced to claim space, the voice deepens, not in a macho way, but in a grounded way, like he's anchoring himself. And you can hear the difference between him speaking to be accepted and him speaking because he believes he has the right to speak. That transition is subtle, and it's satisfying. It feels earned. Now, I want to gently address something that might bother some viewers. The father's refusal to accept Raven can feel repetitive if you want quick resolution. The drama doesn't rush that reconciliation, if it comes at all. And I know some people get impatient with stubborn parent characters because it can feel like, how are we still here? But I actually think the slow burn is the point. Pride doesn't evaporate. Especially not pride wrapped in leadership identity. The father has built a whole worldview around the decision to exile Raven. Undoing that worldview would mean admitting he harmed his own son for nothing. And that's a level of self-indictment most people can't stomach. So the drama makes you sit in that discomfort. And honestly, I respect it. Even when it makes me want to shake the father like a vending machine that ate my compassion. Here's a rehook. Somewhere along the way, you'll realize the father isn't just rejecting Raven. He's rejecting the possibility that love could coexist with leadership. Because in the father's mind, love is weakness. Love clouds judgment. Love makes you vulnerable. So he chooses control. He chooses order. He chooses duty. But the show keeps asking whether that duty is just fear wearing a uniform. And Raven's existence forces that question into the open. Another theme the drama explores is what exile does to your relationship with home. Home becomes idealized. It becomes a fantasy you survive for. But when you return and it's not what you needed, you're left with this void. Raven isn't just grieving rejection. He's grieving the version of home he kept alive in his head. That's a different kind of grief, and it's rarely depicted well. Here, it's depicted with painful clarity. You see Raven trying to reconcile reality with memory, trying to find traces of the warmth that maybe never existed, trying to locate his childhood in a place that now feels hostile. The show uses small physical details to communicate this. Raven's gaze lingering on familiar structures, the way he pauses like he's hearing echoes. It's not spelled out, but it's there. And that's what makes the drama immersive. It cares about emotional geography. Now, I'm going to talk about one more mini-scene in a sensory way, not a plot dump, just a moment of feeling, because it illustrates what this show does best. Picture Raven standing just outside a communal space, listening to voices inside. Warm light spills out, carrying laughter or debate, and he's in the cooler dark. He's close enough to step in, but he hesitates. You can hear the fire crackle. You can smell smoke in your imagination. And his face does that thing where he looks like someone starving watching people eat. Not because he wants food, because he wants the right to sit down. Then someone notices him. The voices shift. The laughter thins. The warmth retreats. And you watch Raven straighten, putting on that mask of composure, because he's learned that needing something is dangerous. That's the show in a nutshell. It makes belonging feel like something you can almost touch, and then it yanks it away. That's why I say it's brutal tenderness. It keeps showing you what Raven wants, and then showing you how hard it is to get it without losing himself. On the technical side, I also have to praise the soundscape of the environment. The drama doesn't feel like it's happening on a silent set. You hear wind, distant movement, the subtle noise of a community. Those details create realism. And when those ambient sounds drop out, you feel it. The show uses that contrast to signal danger or emotional isolation. It's a smart audio strategy. Now, for critics, If any of you are watching this review with your arms crossed, I'll say this. The drama's writing isn't flawless, but it's purposeful. It's emotionally coherent. It knows what it wants to explore. And in a landscape where some dramas feel like they're chasing trends, Raja Yang Ditakuti Musuh feels like it has a spine. But I'll also acknowledge, it leans into archetypes. Exiled prince, harsh father, invading enemy, hidden power. If you're allergic to mythic storytelling frameworks, you might roll your eyes. The difference is that this drama uses the archetype as a doorway, not as the destination. It starts familiar, then it digs into the psychological consequences in a way that feels more grounded than you'd expect. That grounding is what won me over. And I want to return to the idea of Raven's power as both gift and curse, because the show does something quietly devastating with it. It makes Raven's worth visible only when he's useful. That's the tragedy. Before power, he's rejectable. After power, he's necessary. The tribe's love, if you can call it love, arrives attached to utility. And utility-based acceptance is a poison. It teaches you that you only deserve care when you perform. If you've ever felt like you had to earn your place by being exceptional, this drama is going to hit you like a brick wrapped in velvet. Here's another rehook. The question the show keeps dangling is whether Raven can redefine what king means in a culture that has only known control. Because even if Raven eventually sits on a throne, what then? Does he become a gentler ruler? Or does the system shape him into the same kind of leader as his father? The show plants that anxiety early, and it keeps feeding it with small moments where Raven has to choose between compassion and efficiency, between justice and survival, between being seen as strong and being actually good. That tension is what makes the title, King, feel heavy rather than glamorous. The drama also explores, in subtext, how communities handle exceptional individuals. Some cultures worship them, some isolate them, some weaponize them. Red Claw seems to do all three at different times, depending on what's convenient. Raven's arc becomes a study in social psychology, how people project, how they scapegoat, how they cling to narratives. And I love that the show doesn't make Raven naive about it. He's hurt, yes, but he's not blind. He sees the manipulation. Sometimes he plays along because he has to. Sometimes he resists in small ways. That push-pull is compelling. Now, let's talk about the way the drama uses physical cost to make emotional cost tangible. Raven doesn't look pristine. He carries marks of conflict. Fatigue accumulates. He looks like someone who's been through things. And that matters, because it keeps the story from becoming a glossy fantasy where everyone is perfect while suffering. Even the way Raven moves changes. Early on, he's careful, contained. Later, he moves like someone who's accepted that danger is constant. The performance embodies that transformation. It's not just dialogue telling you, he changed. You can see it. That's also where the makeup and costume departments deserve credit. Clothing looks worn. Armor looks heavy. There's dirt. There's sweat. There's texture. It's not all polished. And that grit helps the stakes feel real. I do want to briefly mention that if you're sensitive to intense family rejection, this drama might be triggering in a very specific way. Not because it's gratuitous, but because it's emotionally honest. The father's denial isn't dramatized as a one-off, it's a pattern. And patterns are what hurt. Watching Raven repeatedly bump into that wall can feel exhausting. For me, that exhaustion was part of the experience, but I can see it being too much for some. Still, I think the show earns that heaviness by making it meaningful. It's not misery for misery's sake. It's exploring what rejection does to identity and leadership. And somewhere in that exploration, the show becomes quietly hopeful, not in a sunshine way, but in an ember way. It suggests that breaking cycles is possible, but not easy. It suggests that strength can include tenderness. It suggests that being feared doesn't have to be the only thing you are. But it also warns you, if you let fear be your only language, you will end up alone. I'm going to keep going. because we're not at the point where I'm giving you my final verdict yet. And there's still more to unpack about why the later stretch, in particular, feels like the drama tightening its grip on Raven's soul. There's a shift that happens when survival stops being the immediate question and the question becomes, what kind of world are we rebuilding after the attack? That's when the story stops being only about fighting and starts being about governance, accountability, and memory. And memory is a big one, because Redclaw can't move forward without dealing with what it did to Raven. But communities love amnesia. They love to move on without apologizing. They love to survive and then pretend the survival justifies everything. The drama keeps poking at that tendency. It keeps asking whether survival is enough or whether how you survive matters. That's where the show's moral seriousness really comes through. And just when you think you know what kind of protagonist Raven is going to be, stoic savior, reluctant hero, the drama starts testing his limits in ways that aren't about physical strength. It tests his patience. It tests his willingness to keep sacrificing for people who might never truly see him. It tests whether he can say no. Because no is a powerful word. And it's one Raven has rarely been allowed to use. I want to stop here at another natural pivot. Because the next part one want to talk through is the drama's emotional architecture in the final stretch. How it handles consequence. Whether it gives Raven real agency or keeps him trapped in the role of savior. And why a couple of the show's most effective moments are actually the ones where Raven doesn't unleash power at all, but instead chooses something far riskier. A kind of honesty that could cost him everything. A kind of honesty that could cost him everything. Because that's the thing the drama understands about power. Sometimes the most dangerous move isn't striking an enemy, it's refusing to play the role everyone assigned you. And in the final stretch, Raja Yan Ditakuti Musuh starts squeezing Raven not just with Bloodshadow's threat, but with expectation. It's like the show looks at him and goes, okay, you can survive the outside world. Can you survive being needed? That's the question that haunts the later episodes. And it's why I ended up thinking about this drama long after the screen went dark. The story starts shifting focus from immediate survival to what you might call aftermath politics, the kind of political weather that settles in once the dust is no longer actively choking everyone. Who gets to tell the story of what happened? Who gets remembered as brave? Who gets remembered as reckless? Who gets quietly blamed so the leadership can keep its dignity intact? You can feel the narrative inside Redclaw trying to stabilize itself, trying to become something tidy again, and Raven is the one messy fact that won't stay tidy. He's living proof that the tribe's past decisions were not only cruel, but strategically stupid. And the tribe can either face that or bury it under a new legend. Here's where the show gets almost infuriatingly real. People don't just manipulate facts. They manipulate meaning. They can look at the same event and decide it proves whatever they already wanted to believe. Raven saving them doesn't automatically turn the tribe into better people. For some of them, it becomes proof that they were right all along to be afraid of him. For others, it becomes proof that destiny chose him. For opportunists, it becomes leverage. It's like his heroism is interpreted through whatever lens each person needs to protect their ego. And I found that so psychologically sharp that it almost made me laugh in that bitter way. You know when something is accurate and you're like, oh, so we're just doing human nature today. Great. There's a tension in the later stretch where Raven is finally in a position to demand something, respect, recognition, maybe even an apology. And the drama makes you sit with the question of whether demanding it would actually help. Because if you've been starved of love for long enough, part of you becomes afraid that if you ask for it directly, it'll vanish. So you compromise. You accept substitutes. You accept honor instead of affection. You accept duty instead of tenderness. You accept a seat near the fire instead of a place in someone's heart. And the show keeps nudging Raven toward that cliff. Will he keep accepting substitutes because they're all he thinks he can get? That's why I keep saying it's not a cheap power fantasy. A cheap version of this story would be Raven coming back, unleashing his hidden power, and everyone instantly realizing they were wrong, groveling, cheering, hugging him in slow motion while the score goes full cathedral. This drama doesn't do that. It gives you a mess. It gives you slow shifts, reluctant shifts, shifts that happen in public while people still hate him in private. And honestly, I'm grateful, because the fantasy of instant validation is comforting. But the realism of conditional acceptance is the kind of storytelling that actually sticks. And wait, because one of the biggest, lean forward elements in the final stretch is the way the drama hints that there's more to Raven's exile than the tribe admitted. Not necessarily a soap operatic twist you can summarize in one sentence, but a deeper layer of motive and guilt around why the father made that choice and why the community allowed it. The show doesn't just leave exile as he was dangerous, so they banished him. It starts treating exile like a crime scene, like there are fingerprints on it, like there are people who benefited from it beyond the father, like there are lies that have been told for so long they've hardened into tradition. That's where the tension stops being only about survival and starts being about truth. And truth is always dangerous in a society built on fear. This is also where the performances become even more important, because you start watching characters not for what they say, but for what they can't afford to let slip. And the actors deliver. Raven's actor, especially, plays those late-game conversations with this layered restraint where you can see him fighting two battles at once. One battle is external, political, strategic. The other is internal, emotional, almost childlike. Please, just say you wanted me. And the fact that those two battles coexist in his face is what makes the character feel alive. The father's actor, too, starts showing the cracks without suddenly transforming the character into a sympathetic teddy bear. And I need to praise that choice, because some dramas get scared of letting an older authority figure remain morally compromised. They rush redemption because they think audiences need closure. Raja Yang Ditakuti Musuh doesn't give you closure like a gift-wrapped box. If there's any movement toward reconciliation, it's thorny, it's incomplete, it's contested. It feels like something two damaged people can barely hold. And that's how it should be. I don't want easy forgiveness for a man who rejected his own son publicly. I want a reckoning, or at least an honest portrayal of how hard it is to repair something that was broken on purpose. Here's a rehook for you. Because if you're expecting a simple "father finally says sorry" moment, the drama plays with your expectations in a way that's both satisfying and a little cruel. What the later stretch really focuses on is agency. Raven has been acted upon for most of his life. Exiled, denied, feared, used. Even when he becomes powerful, people still try to act upon him, steer him, frame him, define him. The final stretch asks, does Raven get to choose his identity, or is he forever going to be a story others tell? And the drama's most powerful moments are the ones where Raven refuses the script, where he doesn't respond the way they want, where he becomes unpredictable in the best way. Not chaotic, but self-determined. I'm going to talk about a cinematic feeling moment, again, in a broad way, not a "this exact thing happens" claim, because the show has a few late-stage scenes that feel like they were composed as paintings. There's a night scene, firelight low, the camp or communal space quieter than usual after a day of tension. Raven is alone or effectively alone, even if there are people nearby. The soundscape is minimal, just the crackle of fire, the distant wind, maybe the faintest hint of a drum motif. He stares into the flames like he's trying to read an answer from them. His face is lit in flickers, warm 1 second, shadowed the next. Like the show is literally lighting him as both savior and threat, both son and weapon. Then someone approaches, and the drama lets the approach take time. Footsteps on earth. A pause before speaking. The air heavy with what could be said and what won't be. And in that silence, you feel the weight of everything Raven has swallowed. The scene isn't about battle tactics. It's about whether a human being can keep carrying rejection without becoming hollow. That's the kind of scene Raja Yang Ditakuti Musuh excels at. Minimal movement, maximum emotional voltage. Now, I said I love this drama, and I do, but I want to be fair about what didn't fully land for me in the later stretch. One issue is that the blood shadow threat, while terrifying in presence and tone, sometimes risks becoming more of a narrative function than a textured culture. The show uses blood shadow as a shadow, literally, in the way they're framed, and that works for atmosphere. But if you're the type of viewer who needs the antagonistic force to be explored with equal psychological depth as the protagonists, you might find yourself wanting more. Not necessarily sympathy, not a "they were misunderstood all along" twist, but just more dimensionality so the conflict feels less like our tribe versus the scary other tribe, and more like a clash of ideologies with identifiable human faces. Some viewers will disagree with me and say, no, keeping blood shadow more abstract makes them scarier. And that's a valid take. Fear of the unknown is powerful. I just personally prefer when a drama that's so interested in social systems also shows you the system on the other side, even if only in glimpses. When it doesn't, it can flirt with simplicity in a story that otherwise feels nuanced. That criticism doesn't outweigh the drama's strengths, but it's worth mentioning because hype can sometimes set people up for disappointment if they expect every layer to be equally rich. Another thing, the final stretch, at times, leans into grandness, big statements, big symbolism, big dramatic pauses. And I love a good grand moment, don't get me wrong, but there were a couple instances where it brushed the edge of theatricality. Like the show was aware it was delivering important television. It doesn't collapse into self-parody, but you can feel the show occasionally showing off. If you're allergic to heightened drama, you might roll your eyes at a few of those flourishes. Me, I mostly forgave it because the emotional core is so sincere. But yeah, the drama definitely knows it's epic. Here's another rehook line, because this is where the final episodes get addicting. The closer Raven gets to legitimacy, the more dangerous the people around him become. Enemies outside are predictable. Enemies inside are creative. The later stretch does a great job of showing that being needed doesn't mean being safe. In fact, being needed can make you more vulnerable because it paints a target on you. It makes you a resource to be controlled. It makes you someone others can blame if anything goes wrong. Raven's position becomes precarious in a way that isn't solved by strength. You can't punch politics. You can't intimidate your way into genuine trust. You can't threaten your way into love. And Raven knows that, which is why he often chooses restraint even when it costs him emotionally. And that's where I think the drama becomes quietly heartbreaking. Raven keeps proving himself, and yet the approval he gets feels like a currency that never quite buys what he actually wants. At some point, I realized the drama was making me grieve not just for Raven's suffering, but for the version of him that might have existed if he'd been loved properly from the beginning. That's such a specific kind of sadness. It's like watching a tree grow crooked because it was tied wrong when it was young. You can admire how strong it is now, but you also feel angry that it had to fight so hard to become itself. That's one of the best compliments I can give a drama. It made me mourn a hypothetical life. That means the character felt real. And this is where I'm going to get a little personal again, because the father-son dynamic here messed with me in a way I didn't expect. Not because it's identical to anything in my life, but because it taps into a universal desire to hear from the person who hurt you that they knew what they were doing and they regret it. There's a sick comfort in that fantasy. The fantasy that the harm was at least acknowledged as harm. But reality, often, is that the person who hurt you frames it as necessary, as justified, as for your own good. And when they do that, your pain doesn't just remain pain. It becomes an argument you keep losing. Watching Raven exist inside that argument was exhausting in the most intentional way. It made me think about how many people walk around with invisible exile stories. Maybe not banished from a tribe, but banished from affection, banished from safety, banished from being understood. And they come back again and again, hoping the door will open. This drama doesn't judge that hope. It portrays it as both beautiful and dangerous. Because hope can keep you alive, but it can also keep you trapped. Now let's talk about the direction in the final stretch. Because the show gets more confident with its visual metaphors. It uses thresholds a lot, doors, gates, borders, circles. It frames Raven at the edge of spaces and then gradually changes where he stands. But not always in a linear progress way. Sometimes he's brought in, then pushed back out. Sometimes he steps in and realizes the center is more hostile than the edge. The camera keeps reflecting that shifting status, and it's satisfying if you're paying attention. The color grading also subtly evolves. Early episodes feel earthwarm, firelit, with a sense of history. Later, even within Red Claw, the tones can get colder during political scenes, like the warmth of community is being drained by distrust. When the warmth returns, it's often in smaller, more intimate scenes rather than in big public spaces. That's a visual way of saying public acceptance is harder than private humanity. The editing, too, gets more deliberate about parallels. It'll cut between Raven's isolation and the tribe's gatherings, between the father's authority and Raven's burden. It's the kind of structure that makes you feel like the show is building an argument, not just telling a story. And yes, the music keeps doing that thing where it uses ritualistic motifs to make the world feel like it's operating under ancient rules. In the final stretch, I noticed the score sometimes becomes more sparse in the most emotionally loaded moments, which I loved. It's like the drama finally trusts silence more as it approaches its biggest emotional payoffs. But I'll keep my earlier critique. Occasionally the score is a touch too eager. When it's perfect, it's devastating. When it's slightly too much, it can feel like it's pushing you toward tears rather than letting you arrive there naturally. Not a huge flaw, just a noticeable one if you're sensitive to musical manipulation. Here's a question the drama kept making me ask, and it's one that I think makes the final stretch resonate. What does Raven actually want? Not what the tribe wants from him. Not what destiny wants. Not what the title implies. What does he want? Does he want the throne? Does he want revenge? Does he want justice? Does he want an apology? Does he want to be seen as a son? Does he want to be free? The show's smartest move is refusing to reduce Raven's desire to a single goal. He wants contradictory things because human beings do. He wants to belong, but he's also furious at the place he wants to belong to. He wants his father's recognition, but he also wants to stop needing it. He wants to protect the tribe, but he doesn't want to be consumed by it. And that contradiction is the engine of the later episodes. It's also where the acting continues to impress. Raven's actor plays those contradictions without turning them into melodrama. You can feel him holding back tears not because he's weak, but because he's tired of feeling like his emotions are dangerous. And the father's actor plays stubbornness as a kind of armor that's rusting from the inside. Now, I want to give a shout to the direction of dialogue scenes. A lot of dramas shoot dialogue in predictable short reverse shot patterns that flatten the tension. This show often stages conversations with movement and distance. Someone turning away mid-sentence. Someone stepping closer not to comfort, but to dominate. Someone refusing to meet eyes. Those choices keep the emotional stakes alive. You can feel who has power in the moment, and you can feel it shift. There's one late-stage pattern I noticed. When Raven is forced into a decision that compromises his heart, the camera tends to frame him more symmetrically, more king-like, almost like it's visually crowning him with responsibility. But when he's allowed a moment of vulnerability, the framing becomes looser, more human, sometimes with softer focus or more ambient sound. The drama is basically showing you the difference between the role and the person. And again, that's the story. Raven is trapped between role and person. The tribe wants role. He wants personhood. Here's another rehook, because this is where some viewers are going to either fall in love or bounce off. The ending stretch isn't about winning. It's about what winning turns you into. Without spoiling a specific final outcome, I can say the drama's emotional resolution aims for bittersweet rather than purely triumphant. It understands that some wounds don't close cleanly. Some relationships don't become what you wish they were. Some apologies don't come. And sometimes you have to decide whether you can live without them. And I appreciate that maturity. I also appreciate that the show doesn't pretend heroism is painless. Raven's arc isn't suffer, get power, be rewarded. It's suffer, get power, be burdened differently, and then decide what kind of leader you want to be. Now, because I'm doing moderate spoilers, I want to be careful about how I talk about the final emotional beats. I won't tell you who stands where at the end, who survives what, who says what. But I can talk about the emotional promise the drama makes and how it pays it off. The promise is this: it will take exile seriously. It will take rejection seriously. It will take power seriously. And it will not let family become a magic word that fixes cruelty. On that promise, it delivers. What I loved most is that the show treats Raven's power as secondary to his values. The final stretch keeps putting him in situations where power could solve a short-term problem. But values are what shape the long-term world. And watching Raven try, sometimes falter, sometimes succeed, to lead with values rather than fear is what makes him compelling. Because fear-based leadership is easy. It's the father style. It works until it doesn't. Values-based leadership is harder. It makes you vulnerable. It requires trust. It requires sacrifice without immediate reward. It requires you to keep your humanity when the world is trying to turn you into a weapon. If that sounds like I'm getting emotional, it's because I did. The drama made me reflect on how often strength is defined as dominance, when really strength is sometimes choosing not to become cruel even when cruelty would be efficient. Raven's arc made me think about the times in life when you're tempted to harden because you're tired of being hurt, and whether hardening is survival or surrender. There's also something the show does with the idea of enemy. It doesn't collapse into simplistic moral relativism. Blood Shadow is still dangerous. Red Claw is still threatened. But the drama also suggests that when you build your identity around enemies, you become dependent on conflict. You need an enemy to justify your leadership, your rules, your cruelty. And the father's worldview is steeped in that. Raven's worldview, shaped by exile, is less interested in labeling and more interested in consequences. He's seen what labels do. He's lived inside one. That subtext gives the show weight. It makes the conflict feel like more than a tribal feud. It's a philosophical battle about what kind of society Red Claw wants to be. Now, I'm going to say something that might be controversial for fans who want maximum hype. I don't think Raja Yang Ditakuti Musuh is flawless television. I don't think it's the kind of drama where every subplot is perfectly balanced, every secondary character is fully realized, and every episode is equally sharp. There are points where the story leans on familiar beats. There are moments where exposition creeps in. There are stretches where the antagonistic force feels more atmospheric than personal. But I also think those imperfections are part of what makes it feel like a real drama rather than a prestige art object. It's messy in the way stories about family and power are messy. It's emotionally sincere. It's ambitious. And it's anchored by performances that make you care. And honestly, in 2026, with how many dramas are chasing algorithm-friendly shock moments, I'll take ambition with a few rough edges over something polished and empty. Here's another rehook line before I deliver my final stance. If you're wondering whether the drama earns its title, the answer is yes, but not in the way you think. The fear isn't just external. It becomes internal. It becomes social. It becomes the price of being exceptional. Now let's talk about who this is for. Because I always think that's more helpful than just good or bad. If you're a newcomer who likes character-driven epics, you're going to have a good time. If you like stories where action exists to reveal psychology rather than replace it, this will feed you. If you like slow-burning political tension with emotional stakes, especially family stakes, you're going to get hooked. If you're a fan who came in for the exiled prince returns with hidden power vibe, you'll get that rush. But you'll also get something heavier, the show interrogates the fantasy. It asks what that kind of power does to a person who is already wounded. It asks what a community does when it realizes it needs someone it tried to erase. If you're a critic who's wary of archetypal setups, I'd still recommend giving it a chance because the writing and direction elevate the archetype into something that feels psychologically honest. It's not reinventing the wheel, but it's carving something into the wheel that makes it worth watching. Now, who should skip? If you need lightness, if you want romance-forward storytelling, if you want your family conflicts resolved with neat apologies and hugs, this might frustrate you. If you're impatient with stubborn authority figures and you don't enjoy watching slow, painful shifts in power dynamics, you may find it stressful. And if you require deep antagonistic complexity from the opposing force, you might feel like the blood shadow side stays too much in the realm of dread rather than intimate portrait. But for me, I loved it. I loved it because it respects the pain it depicts. It doesn't glamorize exile. It doesn't turn rejection into a motivational poster. It lets Raven be strong and still be hurt. It lets him be powerful and still be lonely. And it refuses to give you the cheap comfort of instant validation. It's also one of those dramas where the craft is doing quite work all the time. The lighting, the framing, the soundscape, the way silence is used like a blade. The performances, especially Raven and the father, are full of controlled emotion that feels real. You can watch their faces and understand the entire history between them without a flashback. So yeah, on Flick Flare, this one is a strong recommendation from me. Not because it's perfect, but because it's alive. If you've watched Raja Yang Ditakuti Musuh, I want to know what hit you hardest. Was it Raven's return and rejection? The first time his hidden power breaks through? Or the way the tribe's acceptance stays conditional even when they need him? Drop that in the comments, because I genuinely think different viewers will latch onto different wounds in the story. And if you want more long-form drama breakdowns like this, like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care of your heart, because this drama definitely didn't.